on the, so we are just hitting record on this meeting, and I'm going to have Mr. DeMeglio taking taking stock of what's coming into the chat room, just to maybe expedite some things. So if you have questions, like usual, feel free to type them out in the chat room. I'm going to breeze through a few slides. I do have some answers. There are some things I still am waiting for some direction on, and there are some things that are relative to the seniors that we talked about last week that we may just gloss over tonight. Just I know some folks are interested in, but I don't really want to repeat myself all that much. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on things that are related to graduation and the like. So if you have, like I said, if you have questions, feel free to type them, and if we don't have an answer, we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can. I am gonna just share my screen here for a second, and hopefully this will work. Mr. DeMeglio, give me a thumbs up if you're seeing UHS Parent Town Hall. Beautiful.
Perfect.
So as we've said, we're really trying to stick to our core tenets through all of this. We come back to them every single time. And I think one of the things that has become, really more important to us and more important statewide, as the state has given us some guidance as we've moved through different phases. And so the fifth one, which is one that we've talked about supporting growth, has become a little bit more direct from the commissioner, as they've looked at this in a 4-phase rollout. The first phase being the immediate closure and determining where we were. The second phase being the start of remote learning, and again doing some determination about what people had in terms of access, how we were best going to provide instruction, and what our standards were going to be. We're now in what is phase 3, and phase 3 involves, for lack of a better word, finding out where we are in terms of the essential standards that the state has released, really focusing in on some core instruction, and potentially covering new material, which we've had a little bit of work to do, but truthfully, in most of our departments, not as much, because a good chunk of what was essential had already been covered. The moving towards more of an accountability model was in the commissioner's guidance, and there's also some information about graduation and promotion requirements in phase 3. Phase 4, you're actually going to hear a little bit about that tonight too, because phase 4 is planning for the reopening of school. And we are actually already in the planning phases of what that's going to look like. We still really are trying to be incredibly equitable, and trying to do everything we can to meet the needs of all students. And there's flexibility. The reality is, when we left a little more than just about 2 months ago, on March 13th, we thought we'd be back on. We thought we'd originally be back in 3 weeks, and then we thought we'd be back on May 4th, and now we're out for the rest of the year. And with that has meant a lot of flexibility in terms that said, the learning structure was the guidance we were given, but the reality is, it's really meant a lot of flexibility in terms of our curriculum. It's meant some flexibility in terms of what we can expect from different types of students and different people at different times. And it's even meant some flexibility in terms of our staff, and some of the things that they would ordinarily be doing with students. We're really trying to stay connected. I know that becomes harder and harder as the weather gets better. It's harder and harder to stare at a computer. I'm in Zoom meetings, it seems like, probably more than I want to. I'm sure everybody is. And so I think the connection piece gets harder as we go along, and we're trying our best to stay connected as many different ways as we can. So the governor and the commissioner's office offered us essential standards. The stay-at-home order was extended till at least May 18th. That comes up with something in a little bit. We have shared remote learning plans, and so for students with disabilities, those are being updated on a fairly week-to-week basis as far as what resources are available to ensure that students who have disabilities are making progress. If you're having trouble accessing those, let me know. I know there's sometimes some issues with the ownership of the folder that they're coming from online. So if you're running into issues with accessing that, or you want your students to be able to access it better, shoot a note to the liaison or to me, and I'll make sure you get access to it. We are expecting to get some guidance on MCAS within the next 2 weeks. The reality is the biggest one for us remains the science question, and the state has not given us really an inkling yet as to whether they're going to have our students test next year, test in a different subject, or be given the competency determination based on a passing grade in the class. They have not given us, I ask a lot of questions and talk to a lot of people at the department level. They have not leaked a thing. I think it's tighter than Fort Knox with respect to that. When we know that, we'll communicate it out as soon as we know. I know there are a lot of 9th and 10th graders that are wondering about it. I'm sure there are some 8th graders who are wondering what their 9th grade experience is going to look like, whether they're with us or somewhere else as far as MCAS goes. So we right now, were given in a message on Friday from the commissioner that they anticipate giving us guidance on that by the end of May. That being said, we think we have a couple of thoughts on what it's going to look like. Since our last meeting, we do have confirmation that for the rising seniors, current juniors, and for even some of the sophomores who might be interested in this, we have got confirmation that in our region, the SAT will be offered every single month beginning in September. We won't be offering it every month. We do think that Milford is going to offer it every month, but we also think that some of our other surrounding schools like Hopedale, Douglas, and Sutton, as well as Northbridge, are going to also pick up a month that we're not testing so that our students will have some options. For the current juniors, they lost, I want to say, 3 opportunities to take the SAT in March, May, and then June. We do believe that the September SAT is going to be offered. It's not going to run into issues with at least anything pandemic related yet. That could change. The other thing about the SAT that I think is worth noting, there are a great many schools, and this is a conversation, and this was also in the commissioner's guidance. I have a webinar on this next week that are now, Department of Higher Ed is waiving a lot of requirements. And so for students who are concerned about their grades and their test scores and their SATs and their transcripts for this particular semester, and that would go for 9th, 10th, and 11th graders that are rising, because the seniors have already sort of had their decisions made. We don't anticipate there being a problem, and we anticipate higher ed giving us some guidance on what that means in the next month or so. From that, we'll have to adjust our school profile. We'll make sure we do that because we need to be able to adapt what credit, no credit, what credit or no credit means. And credit, no credit for us, there was some confusion that some people felt like, well, it meant credit or no credit for the course. We're using that term entirely for the fourth quarter. So with respect to credit, no credit for the fourth quarter, the department gave us some guidelines on what students would have to do to pass. We are still going to focus on the essential standards. I saw Mr. Pryor in this meeting. The math department went through class by class the standards that they were supposed to do at each grade level, and with, I think, maybe half an exception, everything had been covered already by the time we went out in March, April. As far as what was considered essential. Now, the things that we would have had in our curriculum for April, May, June, if you're a parent of a ninth grader and your kid was in Algebra 2, or you're a 10th grader and your kid were in pre-calculus, and you're worried about what it would be next year, we're already focusing on what next year's class would need to pick up that was considered not essential by the state, but essential as far as we're concerned to be successful in the next class. So that's something we've been doing, and we're asking students to cover these standards now, at least the essential ones, because it's going to help us when we get to the fall. We are still trying to find the best way to make the fourth quarter equitable. I'm going to get into a little bit of our thinking with respect to grading and the commissioner's guidance. The fourth quarter is staying with that pass-fail, credit, no credit model, but we want to make sure that students do not fall too far behind if they don't engage at all. And there are some students that had passing grades for the first 3 terms and will absolutely pass for the year and get credit for the year if they don't do anything in the fourth quarter. The challenge then becomes September. The challenge then becomes the next couple of years. And we really don't want to have a situation where we have students who have not been in the business of school for months on end, and then they try to hit the reset button. And that is really our biggest concern. We do have some students who can't engage in learning right now, be it because of home situations or medical situations or different sort of economic situations. So, one of the things we've talked about, to go back to our very first slide, was being completely equitable and flexible with what those means. We're going to be talking about what it looks like for some students to maybe pass a class this year and have to retake it next year because it would be better for them in the long run. And that's something that will be decided really on a case-by-case and individual basis. What the commissioner's guidance was, and this is verbatim from his memorandum to us on Friday. We have to balance walk a line, and quite honestly, I'm kind of embarrassed that we were told to do this after 4 weeks and not right at the onset. I will tell you that as a high school staff, we did have a plan to roll out with some grading, but we did not want to put the cart before the horse. And the commissioner's guidance is that we have to balance holding students harmless for what they can't do or circumstances beyond their control while still holding them accountable. So essentially, the commissioner's office didn't give us a black and white line that says on this side you will pass and promote, and on this side you will not. They also acknowledge for a lot of kids, grades matter, GPA matters, incentives matter. And so what we've tried to do is hold students harmless that have had trouble adapting to this, but also provide incentives for those who are doing well. And where we have not landed yet, and this is a conversation that our leadership team still needs to have, is though we're landing on a place where we have a balance between credit with distinction, credit, and no credit for the quarter, what we need to be able to do is determine what that impact could potentially be on a year from now or September, and in future course planning. So we're still trying to walk that line very, very closely between the holding harmless for circumstances beyond control while holding students accountable for what they are or are not doing. And again, there was no black line described by the commissioner's office. What they wanted us to do was, in a credit, no credit, or pass-fail system for the fourth quarter, they wanted to make sure that we gave students every opportunity to pass, to earn credit for the year. Now, where we run into some challenges with that, and I'm sure there are some students out there in the audience, or parents in this audience, students who maybe didn't do well in the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, we're used to kids rallying at the end. We're used to kids who then suddenly stay after, they do extra work, they do really well on the final. There's a whole lot of ways that we find that students make progress to earn credit for the year, and earn credit in the terms of earning credit for passing the class and moving on. So within a pass-fail system, we still want to try and get kids over that hump. But we also want to do that cautiously. And I say that because if a student didn't do well first quarter, didn't do well second quarter, didn't do well third quarter, does enough to earn to pass the fourth quarter and thus give the teacher a reason to pass them for the year, we also want to be careful about pushing the student forward too quickly. And again, I come back to that example in math. If a student doesn't pass algebra first term, and doesn't pass algebra second term, and doesn't pass algebra third term, but does everything they can with remote learning in the fourth term, and we give them credit, I worry about that student's readiness for geometry in the next course of the sequence. And so we want to have a lot of very individual conversations in that vein, where we talk to students about, look, you passed, you got credit for the fourth quarter, you got credit for the year, but we might want to talk about repeating a course because it's going to be, in the long run, better for you as a student. And those are going to be individual conversations. We also want to give students the opportunity to bump up their grades. And that was right verbatim from the commissioner. A student who's had a B+ all 3 terms and might do a really nice job in the fourth quarter to try and get an A, we want to be able to bump them up. The language that we gave the staff was, we want to be able to incentivize up. We're not going to punish backwards. And we're not going to punish backwards for students that are struggling for any of a variety of reasons. And so that's where we are right now as far as a GPA calculation. So when we talk about a credit, no credit model, the reason why, and I'll be very honest, the reason why we're not using just pass-fail is that P and F in our grade tables of our computer system, they go back a long way, like all the way, 100 years. And so if we change what they're defined as now, it'll change everybody's transcript going backwards. So we had to come up with some codes that we had never used. The commissioner uses the term credit, no credit for the quarter, not the class. So we wanted to use that same terminology. The other thing we wanted to make sure we did was provide some consistency for the staff. And to be honest, there was a lot of ambiguity and inconsistency out there, class to class, teacher to teacher within certain disciplines and levels, where we found that people were, I don't want to say the word arbitrary, but they were definitely, there was definitely some ambiguity and some inconsistency between what one person was considering passing for the term or credit for the term and what was not. And so we wanted to lay it out very, very clear, black and white, not just for kids, but for parents and for the staff as well. All of our assignments are given a rubric. All of them have a 1 to 4, 2 is passing. And we also wanted to incentivize something that's not here, is there are some students who come to the class sessions but struggle with the written work. Well, we wanted that to count. And we wanted to give teachers the latitude to be able to help that count. And again, that goes into incentivizing what kids are doing. So as you see, it's going to be very, very extremely flexible with what students are doing. And speaking of flexible, what we have not landed on, quite honestly, is the metric. Is it a 95? Is it an 80? Is it a 59? Why we went with 59 if a student does not get any credit for the fourth quarter, to be honest with you, is we wanted it to be fair, but we didn't want it to be something that could completely hamstring a grade. You put in a 0, that's a problem. Even if you put in a kid does 1/3 of the assignments and you put in a 33, that can really impact a grade. So we wanted to reflect something, but the other 2 numbers, not the 59, I think are things that as a leadership team and as a counseling staff, we really need to look at, because we haven't quite landed on the incentive piece. And I think that's something that the commissioner, again, didn't give us a real black and white line on. We want to make sure we're doing it in a way that rewards what kids are doing and doing well, but we also don't want to have it be so unreachable that the student who hands in 80% of their work as passing and has been an A student the whole way around now finds that they've been penalized in the fourth quarter. And so there is going to be some gray. The important numbers to focus on is really how many of the assignments are handed in. And with 6 weeks left, we wanted to give it enough time. And this is, Mr. DeMeglio will back me up on this. I mean, I've been doing this is my 19th year. My first 5 years in the classroom, I taught seniors every year. And these 3 weeks were invariably the busiest weeks of the year if you had seniors, because they were suddenly getting all the assignments that they had missed from March were suddenly appearing for kids that were struggling. For students that are done and have been keeping up with things, they're pretty much going to be on pace and it won't be an issue. And for those who we have on a case-by-case basis that are not able to do these assignments, we do have mechanisms for exemption. And that's usually handled on a very individual level. And I'm not going to lie, that's happening daily and changing daily, because the last thing we want to be is the precipitating factor of another stressor for families and for kids and for anybody. But we do want to be clear that, that these assignments that we're giving count. What we have not also landed on, just to give a kind of a standard definition, assessed as passed means on the assignment, the student got a 2 or a higher. We have found that some students go back and redo things. We do find that the workload, I think, has been mostly reasonable. We have had a couple of classes where it's been, I think, a little off kilter, and we've talked some people back off the ledge, not students, staff, because they've given entirely too much, or the expectations have not been what we would expect are appropriate for the times. And again, credit, no credit. I can't reiterate this enough in terms of the fourth quarter. It really is our terms for pass fail. And it is not connected to overall credit for the transcript. The only place where that may be the case is in some of the classes where if a student earns credit for the fourth quarter, is showing that he or she has mastered everything for the year and thus deserves credit for the class, even though they may not have been passing. And that's, again, that incentive to bump kids up. That's, again, for kids who are struggling. We are really trying to stay as tight as we can to the department's guidelines. They're not ideal. But we also wanted to simplify things. I shared with the superintendent, I shared with our leadership team as well. I mean, we've been talking about this for how long, Mr. DeMeglio? 5 weeks?
At least. Yeah.
Probably at least. I've shared with them probably 12 other models for grading, and we just wanted to keep it simple. We really wanted to keep it simple. There are some schools that require attendance. We did not want to go down that road. There are some schools that are requiring, that have different breakdowns between, 90% and then 80 to 89%, 70 to 79%. We didn't want to go that route. And then there are some that have different standards based on the type of class it is, honors, college prep, so on and so forth. It was becoming more and more complicated. And so we went as simple as we could while staying true to the kind of the spirit of what the commissioner released. When we refined the weekly schedule, and I'm asking for your help on this, the students and actually some families had asked us to move things to go Friday to Friday. We did that a couple of weeks ago. I do know there have been a couple of people who have written out to me or reached out to me and have said, hey, some class assignments are still getting posted middle of the week. If you are seeing that Friday postings are not happening, I'm not out to have you get people in trouble. This isn't so I bury anybody. I just need to know, because that was an expectation that we set. So if you're finding that there's a specific class, I just want to be able to help. This is not about accountability for anybody other than me. When we make a promise, we want to keep it. And so if you're finding that like an assignment for Friday is not being posted until Tuesday and is still due the following Friday, we don't want that. It's Friday to Friday. If extra time is needed, request extra time. Again, lots of flexibility. The class time midweek can be spent on getting support for those assignments. and it allows students, if they see the assignment on Friday, you know, I'm, let's be real, I don't think a lot of them are looking at it on Saturday and Sunday, but if they do, teachers are available Monday, Thursday, Friday, lots of office hour times, virtual class times. I've seen teachers that are doing office hours at 4 o'clock at night. I've seen them that are doing sessions with kids at 7 o'clock in the morning before the kid goes off to work. So feel free to we're going to continue to be very flexible with that. And again, if assignments come in late, they're going to get full credit. There's no like markdown because they came in a few days late. And I know Mr. DeMeglio and I have helped with some of those, and if we need to keep helping, we will.
And just to tag on to that, Mike, a little bit, I've been in touch with so many families. It's incredible. And what I found was that, when I tell them, hey, you can go back and do that third quarter assignment and we'll get you the credit that you need for that assignment, they light up. It's a game changer, and that's so important to hear because there's so much hardship out there. You wouldn't believe it. If I told you, I could spend an hour telling you different stories. So, when they hear that we can go back in and give them credit for assignments that are a little bit late, it really does light the spark and get them going, and they can see the finish line again. And that's so important. We're trying to do that more and more every single day. And I think we're having some success with that.
And by the same token, sometimes people are a little bit gun shy about reaching out, but the only way we know if things are a struggle is if you let us know. And typically, I know it says 80% of the assignments or 90% of the assignments, but that's the 90% of the assignments that the student's able to do. I mean, if there's a week that we know that things are just not good for whatever reason, we do have the ability to tell some staff, and usually it's the staff themselves who will say, yeah, you know what, we can exempt that, we're good. And we want to be clear about that, but we don't know what we don't know. And there are different times, in the last 6 weeks where it might just be, this week I really feel like I can focus on my English, but I'm not going to get to that math because I'm not able to do it. So those are the things that we want to try and work with people on so that it doesn't have this significant negative impact on really anything. And if they need extensions, if they need to revisit a prior term, please, counselors are working with them and working with the teachers and working with us to help students go back and make sure that they're getting everything that they need done. In terms of technology, I don't know how many 8th grade parents there are, and it only impacts about 20 kids, but Mr. Missler will be reaching out to the 20 of you. So if they're not here, but this is a question of someone, the devices that belong to the 8th graders, they do have to come back. I know there was a question about whether they'd be able to keep them. They can't. There will be a removal guide. It's about a 2-step removal guide that helps them wipe the device. There's also a way to port the information. We shared that with the seniors. We're going to be sharing that with them in the next couple of weeks to get everything out of their Google Drive for school and move it over so that it's they don't lose their materials. We'll try and keep repair costs down if the device needs to be repaired, because that which needs to be returned has to come back in working order. And we'll show how to do the Google Drive. I talked about MCAS already. What we do believe, and this is something I will go out on a limb for, is that even with science, what we believe is that they're going to be tested on the practice standards, not necessarily the content. And that's something our teachers are working on to make sure we know very, very well going in case the test is offered in the fall. And we're going to connect all of our skills, but the science, we're not sure if it's going to be a content related test. In fact, I'm venturing that it's not going to be, but this is just what we think. It's not etched in stone. Couple of weeks, we should have an answer for you, or those of you who are parents of 9th and 10th graders. Underclassmen, transcript requests. If you need a transcript, mostly at this point, it's for RMV purposes. I don't know if driver's tests are going to be reopening anytime soon. But if you need a transcript request for any reason, there are some juniors who may start reaching out to colleges, and they want their transcripts through 2.5 years. Some dealing with college coaches and things like that. I'm going to send this out in a day or so, but that tiny URL / UHS transcript 2020 will be like a form for requesting a transcript. It will be mailed home. It will be in a sealed envelope. You got to plan on about 2 weeks lead time because we're not in the building every day. And the reason I say that is if you fill it out today, the person who is filling that out might not be back in the building again until Thursday or Friday. And so by the time it gets posted, it might be a week, but it might be 2, depending on the timing. So if you need something urgently, we do have the ability to do a digital transcript. The problem with the digital transcript is some people don't accept it because it doesn't have a signature on it. And it doesn't have the seal. There's a stamp that we have to put on. And if it doesn't have that sealed transcript, sometimes it's not accepted. But we have had that request. And speaking of driver's ed, sadly, the man who coordinated our driver's ed passed away probably about 4 weeks ago. Mr. LeBlanc, I don't know how many of you knew him, passed away probably about 3 weeks ago now. And so I'm sorry for sharing that news in such an impersonal fashion. We have not been in touch with what it'll look like next steps about contracting out with whether somebody's taking over that driving school or we have to look at potentially a different one. That was something we would have done around this time of year. We would be re-upping with them, but unfortunately, that right now is in limbo, but we are going to get an answer for you. We may need a new vendor. Either way, it is something that we will work very, very quickly on, or as quickly as we can. The problem is we won't be able to have it at Uxbridge High School until the building is open to the public. And right now, the building is not open to the public. And that leads me to one of our next couple of pieces of information. As far as senior events, I know there are a couple parents of seniors. There are some parents of juniors in here. It is not looking good for prom. And I know there are underclassmen who look forward to prom. I should have prefaced this meeting by saying there's not going to be a lot of happy news in this meeting. But the prom, we do not think that we are logistically or legally going to be allowed to have an event with 300 people and no social distance guidelines anytime soon. We have talked to the advisors of the junior class and the senior class about having a class-only event. Should we be allowed to get to that point where, we'd have an event for the seniors, and that would be something over the summer, and then the juniors could do something separate, even if that takes us into the fall. We are not sure if that's even something the class is going to want to do, and that would mean they'd be, essentially carrying 2 major events in about a 7-month period of time, and may not want to. And the reality is we may not be able to. But we are trying to keep these things on some form of life support. We do have a date held for a senior prom. And we've actually held it as the availability of a junior senior prom. I just don't want to make a promise that I don't want us to be making a promise we know we can't keep. And we've been pretty clear about that with the students and with the advisors. I know a couple of the advisors are here right now. And we're doing the best we can with that situation. And we'll take the feedback of the kids, and we'll take the feedback of the advisors, and most importantly, the feedback of the state, because right now we're not allowed to do anything. We are looking at doing still an awards night, but that will likely be the only thing that is virtual. I'm going to be releasing, hopefully Wednesday, maybe Thursday, a plan for our senior parade that involves our community. The reality is that's something that has also had to go through public safety. There may be some people here that saw that Northbridge did something. I can't speak to what Northbridge did. I can only speak to the communication I've had with our great public safety partners who have been super awesome, I got to be honest, about helping us with this. And we have also outlined 2 scenarios related to graduation. And since last week, we've come up with something that may be a third. We have to pitch them to the Board of Health, and we're trying to figure out, exactly when or if we'll be able to host what we want to be able to do, and have it be something that is personal. I will tell you that the likelihood of a community graduation is not great. I know that it's something that people like to come and see their friends and, usher and be at the school when the procession ends. And that doesn't look likely. If we have anything at all, it's likely to be family only. And we are really focusing in on a couple of things that we know we'll be able to pull off, rather than, again, making promises that we can't keep. We have had a bunch of our coaches and clubs have been hosting meetings. I know there are probably some underclassmen here who are part of organizations or sports. We're also looking at ways to have kids connect over the summer as we have the opportunity to do so. We're using videos, we're using social media, we're using podcasts, and it's not the same. I was talking to some folks over the weekend and around Mother's Day, and the reality is these students are really starting to, I think, miss each other. We miss them. And we want to try and find ways that we can get people back as we can get them back. A couple weeks ago, there was a public safety post here in the town I live in, of a bunch of kids who drove to the parking lot at the high school, and they were in a circle sitting on the hoods of their cars talking to each other, social distancing and able to see each other. And that's perfectly fine. And if those are the sort of things that we need to try and give as ideas, we will do that to get people to get back together, so it's not always a Zoom call. And we are still going to have class meetings over the next few weeks for our 8th, 9th, and 10th and 11th graders. As the information gets more specific, particularly for the 11th graders about the college search process, and for the 8th and 9th and 10th graders about planning ahead for next year. As far as staff access, again, we're trying to provide information and we're trying to reach out, but we're also not trying to pique anyone's anxiety or overwhelming anyone. Staff are trying really hard. Mr. DeMeglio tells me, we both called some parents, and we've gotten this is great. It would really be awesome if their teacher called us and talked to the student. And then we get the other calls that sometimes look at us and say, we've heard from 7 people in the last 3 days. Could you back off a little bit? And we're trying to walk that line. So if you give a counselor a call, or you give one of us a call and you say, look, we're good, you don't need to call me, we'll respect that. But please assume positive intent. The student feedback about their access to staff has been very positive. But different people have different things going on. We've had a couple of staff members who've experienced some loss in the last week or so, and a couple more who are dealing with some things on the home front. And it may appear defensive on my part that, Mr. DeMeglio or I will be saying, yeah, there's a lot going on right now. Don't take it to heart. We really mean that. There are some situations involving our staff that are really complex, and they're doing their best to reach out. So if you don't get a response right away, I could say don't take it personally, but I can tell you they're dealing with some of the same things that a lot of us in the community are. So please be patient and reach out to us if you run into any of those sort of challenges. You want to add anything on that, Mr. D?
No, I mean, as we make the phone calls, we're listening, we're paying attention, we're trying to put some things together to help people. Like one of the things, today I realized very quickly that, there are some parents out there that just don't know how to use Google Classroom. And as an educator, we take that for granted. We think that everybody knows how to use that. And you know what? At the beginning of the talk, I told Christine Pryor, I said, thank you so much for doing that video. She uses it every day. She made a little screencast for us. And when a parent's out there that they don't know how to use Google Classroom, it's a how-to use the student side of Google Classroom, which is nice because you get to see all the assignments, when they're due, when they've been turned in, and you get to see that side of it. And that's, I think, will really help. It'll help me too, because I spend 15 minutes trying to teach somebody how to use Google Classroom, and that doesn't always work really well. They need a video, and so it's these kinds of things that parents are asking for, and we're trying to get that stuff out there that'll really help you understand and understand what your students are going through, and just to help you out to navigate through some of the things that we navigate through all the time.
Moving on, a few rando questions that have come up. Some folks have asked about building access. Again, finally on Friday, the Executive Office of Public Health and the Executive Office of Education finally gave us some direction that gave us permission to allow students and staff back into buildings, to clean out lockers, to look for materials, if there's a missing library book or any of that sort of thing. We are coming up with a plan that we have to actually have approved by our Board of Health first. So it's not just a free-for-all. What we are thinking it is going to look like is we think it's going to be a specific day and time, and if it's not okay for the student to make, we'll have a backup time, and we probably do one in the morning and one in the evening, and it's going to be you have 10 minutes to get in, clean out your locker, you go in one way, you go out the other, so that we don't have multiple people in the hallways at the same time. And we are working on that plan. Our hope is to organize that with, no, this isn't our hope. We will be organizing this with the other two buildings so that people who have kids in multiple buildings aren't going to be trying to, organize themselves around, wait, I have to be at Uxbridge High School at the same time I have to be at Whiten, which is the same time I have to be at Taft. We're trying to be really, really sensitive to that, and trying to be really strategic and planful and do it on different days, but at the same time be safe, because we do have some people in our community who are medically fragile. The counselors have been reaching out. They did a lesson a couple weeks ago, their typical lesson with sophomores, and are going to be reaching out over the next few weeks, not only with juniors, but other students in case there are issues with respect to schedules for next year. Some people had said, we were focusing in on the seniors. There are some specific tasks to the sophomores and juniors that lessons that are done this time of year. And again, we continue to focus the new content with enrichment. And that brings us to what we're considering for next year. Phase 4 from the commissioner is about next year. I joke oftentimes in the world of schools, we start building next year's budget almost before the ship is off the dock for the current year. Our budget goes to the school committee in like December, January, is approved in February, which means we're working on it in September and October. For Mr. DeMeglio and I, we are usually working in 3, if not 4 school years simultaneously for the purpose of, where are our kids? What do our trends look like? What do our staff look like? What does it look like we have coming up? What does it we need in terms of space and money and all that other sort of thing? So we are focusing right now on course scheduling for students and recommendations for students who may need some intervention coming back next year. And what we are going to be looking at, and we actually have a meeting about this tomorrow, is what supports do people need? What supports do people need emotionally? What supports do people need physically? And what supports do people need academically as we come back to school? What supports do we need in terms of our facility? You've all been, some of you have probably been to a food store. I went to the post office for the first time in I don't know how long, and there's a plastic shield, and the little handle thing for the little device that you put your credit card in is 6 feet away from the guy behind the counter. And what sort of things do we need to do in our building to make it, for lack of a better word, safer? If we need,
Mr. Rubin, Really quickly, just before you go too far, I want to go back to scheduling just very quickly. The guidance counselors are working through student schedules now, and they're trying to get a hold of kids when they need to make changes in the student schedule. So if the students could really pay attention to their email, because that is the way they will try to contact kids to get some input in terms of some of the changes that might need to be made to their schedules. So just if you could ask them to just kind of pay attention to their email, that would be very helpful to the guidance counselors. Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
No problem. We've been looking in terms of transitions academically, and we're also looking at what we are going to need to do to get back to a routine, and what that routine is going to look like. I had a conversation this afternoon, a meeting this afternoon with a couple of folks about just that. I had a meeting last night with a couple of other principals talking about the different kinds of routines that have been disrupted and what sort of support people are going to need, not just kids. And on that level, we're looking at different protocols that we need to have in place. Cleaning protocols, potentially movement in the building, safety within the building. I can assure you this is not something we're doing on an island as a high school staff. This is a pretty big component of the work that we're doing as a district. And I will say proudly that I brought this up with one of my colleagues yesterday in a conversation, and he said, I'm really glad somebody's thinking about it because we're not. Do you mind sending us what you guys are doing? Because this isn't even on our radar. I can assure you this is on our radar. It's very much on our radar, and it's absolutely something we're going to be making sure we have different scenarios. So again, while we talk about working in 3 or 4 years simultaneously, looking ahead to 21, 22, 2021, and wrapping up 19, 20, we're looking at different scenarios for what 19, 20 looks like as we head into 2021. And that's not to frighten anybody. That's just to give you the confidence that we are absolutely on top of a lot of different things to make sure we have plans in place. There's no need for us to share any of that right now, but there is work in progress. There's been a lot of speculation. I've gotten a lot of emails about, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Those emails are really helpful, but I want you to hear that we are thinking about it. And we're not thinking about it alone. We're thinking about it with, Dr. Tiano, the rest of the admin team. And these are things that we're trying to lay the framework for now, because if we wait until September, it's too late. The other things that we're looking at for next year, our school council approved our school improvement plan. The district improvement plan is in progress, and we still want to continue to move forward. We are not complacent. We do know that response to how we come back to school is a big part of how we're going to transition. We had done a good deal of our grade 7 activities in the building already. So we are focusing on transition supports for grade 7. I say that because while this is geared towards high school folks, you may have some people for grade 7. We are going to start doing, might be trying to do a couple of things over the summer and even into May and June with just getting the 7th graders in the same place. And one of the things that we are going to start focusing on is treating the juniors like seniors. And what do they need? We have a workshop that we've been invited to next week that's on college planning in the COVID-19 era. If you can't go to a college visit, how do you plan for that? So those are some of the things that we're really trying to gear in on. And we have made the announcement to the students that we're going to be doing our class elections in the fall. The class that to me that impacts the most is really the rising seniors, because this is the time of year where they start to plan some of the things that they would do next year. And, if they have a slate of officers that work on things now, and those slate of officers aren't reelected in the fall, I could see that becoming potentially challenging. But that hasn't necessarily been the case in my time at UHS, but we aren't going to do any elections until the fall. And we're already working on curriculum revision. It's not necessarily true revision as much as it is getting a sense of where we need to start next year. And then again, it's support. And something you're going to hear us talk about over the summer, and this will be redundant, is you're going to hear words like we're going to be sending home a specific kind of assessment. And it might be something just very simple about, how anxious are you about returning to school? And if our students are, 95% of them are saying, we're cool, we're good. We need to make sure we put supports in place for the 5%. But if we have 10% that say, I'm cool, and 90% who say they're not, we have a different kind of support we need to put in place. And that's sort of what we want to be able to do as we look ahead to the next few weeks. Right now, the struggle's real. I mean, I have 2 kids at home, like some of you have 2 kids in our school or 2 kids in the district or more. I have a 4th grader and a kindergartner, and me trying to manage that and Uxbridge High School and my professional responsibilities and everything else. I've never been a stay-at-home kind of guy, so this has been the struggle is real, and I get it. And I want you to hear that everybody in our building knows that this is not a cakewalk or a walk in the park for anybody. But we really want to help you help our students make progress. And there comes a certain point in time. I have 2 nieces or nephews that are high school age, and I have a niece at Uxbridge High School in grade 8. And at a certain point, they control their own destiny. I mean, we're not going to, grab them and throw them in front of a computer and say, do this now. And we need to be able to support you and support them while, realizing that we can't really twist anybody's arm, but we want to support you. We want to support our community. We want to support our staff. And so if there are things we could be doing differently, I guess the moral of the story is tell us. If there's a class that's gone off the rails, tell us. If there's a class that is becoming too much for your particular child, tell us. If there are things that we need to consider as we loop forward into the fall for your kid, for your family, tell us. And the one thing I said to the seniors that I'll reiterate is every one of the emotions that we're feeling is legit. I vacillate between frustration and satisfaction to where we're at, to impatience and fear and grief and sadness. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I welled up at the end of the senior meeting last week. I miss those kids. I miss your kids. I miss them all. And I'm having a hard time grieving with the senior class for the things that they've lost this year. So we manage those emotions together and we move on and do the best we can, because the end of the day, we can't control it. And we can't control, everything else. All we can do is control our response. And as I've said before, all I know is every single day that we wake up, we're one day closer to the end of this. And as I said to the seniors last week, and I maybe said to you guys, to underclass parents, I just hope and pray this is over sooner rather than later. Coming back to our core values for this, stay connected, understand that some of this is a work in progress and we have to be flexible. We're going to try and stay as equitable as we can all the way through. We've never been through this, although I will say with some of them here tonight, you could not be for 99% of this. Our staff has just been tremendous at building the plane while it's been in flight, or building the ship while it's already out to sea. They have done everything they can to help you and help our kids and help me. And last week was Teacher Appreciation Week, and I kind of joked with some of my friends who are not educators. They said, "Man, I never realized how hard it was to teach grade X or grade Y, and I've never appreciated it so much." I think that's a common refrain right now, and I know there are a bunch of them here right now. So in front of a different group of parents, I appreciate what they've done so much in helping us ride this roller coaster and do the best they can with really a difficult situation. if you ask any of the educators in this room, they'd rather be in the building. They'd rather be in front of kids and working this hard to try and change how Uxbridge High School delivers its education on a dime overnight is a credit to them. I really can't thank them enough. And with that, I think I'll open it up to any questions that we may have. Like I said, I will do my best to answer any of them that I can. Mr. DiMeglio, anything from that chat room that you think we need to make sure we tackle? And I know there are a couple guidance counselors here. I don't know if there's anything we got to in about. I'll come find them while you're answering anything that was in the chat room.
I think I've answered everything in the chat room. We'll try to get those videos posted to the webpage tomorrow, if they're not already posted. I think they may be, one maybe. Other than that, I can send it out to the staff as well, and the staff use it where you need to. And again, thank you, Mrs. Pryor. I appreciate it. All your help.
I just asked Mr. Barry if there's anything else we needed to cover. He said no, Mrs. Schiller. I don't think there's anything medically. If students still have things they need to pick up, I think most of it's been picked up. I don't think there's anything from the nurse's office that we need to address, and I think that's about it. I don't personally have anything else that I need to add. So I'm just grateful that we had a good turnout here tonight, and I hope these things are helpful. And to whoever said it takes a village, it sure does, and it absolutely does. So I hope if there's one thing that people take away from this and from anything else that we're doing is we may be apart, but we're not in this alone. No one's in this alone, and we will do whatever we can over the course of the next few weeks and into the summer. And as soon as we have dates and times and anything else for allowing students back into the building to retrieve things and all of that, we'll do the best we can to get that information out to you. And by the same token, if there are things that need to be returned, we'll do it all at once. So, Mr. DiMeglio, anything you want to add before we say goodnight?
Thank you to everybody, and just have a good night. We'll talk again.
Stay safe, everybody. This is where I get to unmute everybody and have a
Chris, go to your place.
Perfect timing.
That was perfect.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.
Homeschooling.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
There we go.
All right, Mr. DiMeglio, I'm going to hit stop recording.